Another human? I don't believe this.
Me neither. And I am very impressed that you're walking around with one shoe.
Yeah, it took some getting used to.
Hello all. As you know, in the previous two videos on this channel, we covered the notorious Admiral DTA and the first season of his Amphibia fanfiction, Loyalty Among Worlds, starring his OCs, Daryl, totally not a self-insert and not so loyaliate, Tint and Chronax Tormac. If you want to know my in-depth thoughts on this fanfiction, then check out the video I did covering the aforementioned first season, but to put it simply, I thought that season 1 of Loyalty Among Worlds was downright awful. Terrible characters whilst leeching off Amphibia episodes with little to no originality that suffered greatly from formatting and grammatical errors with writing that makes me want to throw up as a result of how campy, cheesy and corny it was. The artwork meant to depict the events in the fanfiction is inconsistent, ranging from either really good to really shit. Recent developments in the good old Daryl saga have changed some things, but today we are not looking at Loyalty Among Worlds or Admiral DTA in general, oh no. Instead, we are going to be looking at a fanfiction that aims to answer the question, what if Lucenocida befriended the trio and was transported to Amphibia? What if there was a fourth gem on the box? This fanfiction, in my opinion, is the best Amphibia fanfiction I have ever read, hands down. But why? What makes this fanfiction so spectacular? What makes this fanfiction stand out amongst the rest I read? Today, we will be reviewing The Owl and the Frog by Champion El Cid, so let us get started. Much like in the last video and for future fanfiction reviews going forward, I'll give off a list of usual information before you watch this video. Firstly, I was originally planning on covering arcs 1 and 2 in this video, but as it turns out, it would have made the video over 2 hours and 30 minutes in length, and so I cut it in half. If you want to gain early access to part 2 and more, then donate to my Ko-Fi link down below to gain early access to not just new videos, but exclusive Discord perks and a shout out at the end of the video. Secondly, much like the previous video, I'll be putting images and artwork on screen to depict the events of the scene. However, these aren't really screenshot edits, but more so original artwork illustrated by both artists that Champion commissioned and a bunch of others. I'll leave a link to each of the artists' social media profiles to go and support them. Thirdly, despite Prologue not officially being counted as part of an arc, I will still include it as it is technically part of Arc 1 and just so I can simplify things. Finally, I'll put a link in the description to the fixed AO3 and fanfiction.net pages so you can check it out. I also strongly advise having watched Amphibia and the Owl House beforehand. I also recommend that you read the fanfiction before watching this video, as I truly recommend you go in blind, as not doing so means that you're not exactly going to have the premium Owl and the Frog experience, so to say. Without further ado, let us begin. The story begins with Lucenocida sitting in the back of her mother, Camilla's car in shame. This is due to her having expelled from school as a result of her presentation having gone severely wrong. During the presentation, she used actual spiders, and while she didn't use venomous spiders, she actually didn't think that an individual in her class would actually end up being hospitalized as a result. Camilla, on the other hand, didn't yell or scold Luce. Instead, she simply got in her car and urged her not to say a word. She then spoke to Luce after a long period of time, telling her that while she was angry, that they will eventually get through this. This breaks Luce as she tearfully apologizes constantly to Camilla and that she didn't intend for people to get hurt. Camilla reminded her that her antics did indeed get people hurt and thus she needed to think before she does anything. To that end, she confiscated all of her Good Witch Azura books and figurines for a month, much to Luce's disappointment, and that she'll have to find another school in the meantime. During the rest of the ride home, Luce kept thinking about going to a new school and leaving the old one behind, which isn't exactly a loss seeing as she had practically no friends. Once they arrived home, Luce collected all of her Azura figurines, her Azura book collection, and handed them to her mother. Once that was done, she remained in her room until dinner, which itself was a quiet affair. Camilla tried lifting up Luce's spirits and to not let this mistake define her, and that actions still have unintended consequences. Cut to a few weeks later with Camilla announcing to Luce that, after speaking to Boon Chai at Tai Go, that she may have found Luce's new school, and that school being none other than St. James Middle School. The chapter then ends with Luce wondering what a private school would be like. This chapter was a pretty good start. Luce being expelled for her antics is an interesting idea that I don't see other fanfictions doing, considering the shit Luce did in canon prior to entering the Demon Realm. Also, what's interesting is that Lucenocida is said to be 13 years old, which I think is a nice touch as other fics have Luce being the same age as canon, 14, making her significantly older. The dialogue is also strong, with it being pretty faithful to the original source material. Camila's dialogue being close to her personality is especially noteworthy, as this was written back when we didn't really have much to go off of. Overall, this chapter is a solid 10 out of 10. The chapter begins with Luce waking up and feeling tired due to her lack of sleep as a result of her nervousness about going to a new school. She felt even more bummed out as the uniform requires a skirt, something Luce was not comfortable with, sans for special occasions, as she prefers shorts. Despite this, Luce put on her uniform and looked in the mirror, noting how wrong it feels to look at herself wearing this, though she does like the shirt. She also has to wear similar coloured tights to her old leggings, meaning that the only part of her canon attire that was kept was her white khakis. Camila then drops Luce off at school, but not giving back her Good Witch Azura book, and then leaves. Shortly afterwards, Luce got knocked over by a girl riding in her bike. Afterwards, she apologises to Luce as Luce apologises to her, and they begin complimenting each other's shoes. Then Luce recalls how this is similar to the scene of how Korra met Amon in the first episode of Avatar: The Legend of Korra, though they incorrectly label it as an anime. Their anime discussion, started by something that wasn't even anime to begin with, was cut short by the school bell before they parted ways. Luce introduced herself to the girl, as did the girl. The girl in question is none other than Anne Boonchoy. Cut to lunchtime and Luce spots Anne, Sasha and Marcy sitting at the lunch table. Anne introduced Luce to Sasha and Marcy, with Marcy having asked Anne if Anne really did run Luce over. Sasha reminds Anne that she told her that the bike can go extremely fast and that Anne could go running it down the hill in the park. Anne explains that there might be people in the way, but Sasha brushes it off, stating that'll be fun. Luce notes how that's an odd way of fun, before Sasha then asks about what Luce does for fun. Luce replies with quote, "Well, I like editing anime clips to music and reading fantasy books with complicated backstories." Yeah, I genuinely cannot be asked to do the voices this time, I'm sorry guys. That last part caught Marcy's attention, given that she's also interested in fantasy books, and as it turns out, she is also a massive fan of the Good Witch Azura. The two gush about the series and are about to speculate what happens in the next book, only for Sasha to shut them both up before Luce told Marcy that she'll continue this conversation later. Sasha then jokes that if it was up to Marcy, then she'll gush about creatures and caverns all day. Marcy then retorts by teasing Sasha about it and tells her not to pretend to hate it, considering that Sasha's character / the warrior was now leading her own tribe of barbarians. After some more chatter, Luce reveals the reason she got expelled from her previous school as a result of the presentation incident. After hearing this, Sasha and Marcy are amazed, with Marcy drawing parallels to a Fire Emblem reference that I do not get because I do not play Fire Emblem. Finally, we get a scene of Anne querying Luce about her previous school, if she had any friends and ethnicity. The two found common ground on these, with Luce having told Anne that she has no friends, and Anne having told Luce that she only really had Sasha and Marcy, as well as Luce being of Dominican descent and Camila having been a migrant, similar to how Anne is of Thai descent and her parents are migrants as well. The chapter then ends with Luce being excited for tomorrow as Camila drives her home. This chapter was really good. It does a great job establishing the newfound friendship between Luce and the trio. The dialogue reads like it came straight out of an Amphibia episode as well, so that's brilliant. My favourite scene of this chapter was the ending in which Luce and Anne have a heart-to-heart talk, which I found really lovely. And despite Anne and Luce incorrectly labelling The Legend of Korra as an anime, that doesn't exactly detract from the final score. If anything, it's one of those small details that really makes the characters feel alive. 10 out of 10, another perfect score. This is the first of 3 chapters in which we see Luce go on our own adventures with each member of the trio, starting with Sasha Waybright, so let's get on with it. The chapter starts with Luce at her locker preparing to grab gym clothes. However, she is stopped by a girl named Cindy who demands that Luce pay her to use the locker. That was until Sasha arrived. She warned Cindy via telling her an altered version of why Luce was expelled from her previous school. She claims that rumours were spreading that alleged Luce could tame spiders, and the reason she got expelled was that she commanded her pet spider to bite a student, hospitalising them and getting her expelled as a result. Cindy first tried calling out her bluff, but then fled after Sasha pretended to be looking around for the spider. Luce was confused as she thought Sasha wasn't going to tell everyone. Sasha elaborated that she never said they were true, that they were just rumours that she heard, and it was good because it portrays Luce as someone to be reckoned with. Honestly, good on you, Sasha. Though Sasha states that Luce now owes her something in return, that something being becoming her gym partner. Cut to the volleyball game where Sasha and Luce end up winning every game. After the game, Sasha led Luce into the toilets, pulled out a knife and carved her initials into the mirror before asking Luce to do the same. Luce hesitates briefly, but Sasha pressures her into doing so, to which Luce complies, and thus carved her name into the mirror, whilst feeling really bummed out about the whole thing. Later, Luz re-encountered Cindy, albeit she was much less aggressive towards her as a result of her name being carved into the mirror. Cindy allows Luz to access her locker, the latter noticing that Cindy's friend groups weren't mocking her. Sasha then re-encounters Luz and told her to be thankful. The chapter then ends with Luz feeling happy that other students respected her. This chapter was great, but I'm not exactly a fan of gym episodes per se, but I digress. Sasha and Luz's dynamic is fantastically written here, with their behaviour matching up how they behave in canon and how they would interact had they actually met in canon. Also, Cindy pulling a full 180 when Sasha tells her what Luz allegedly did alongside seeing Luz's initials carved into the mirror was pretty neat too. This chapter does get 1 point subtracted for being a gem episode, so that would be a 9 out of 10, but I think that's kinda petty, so 10 out of 10. The chapter starts off with revealing that it's been several weeks and that Luz has recently had an English test to which she's dreading the result. To calm her nerves, she and Marcy began discussing Azura theories, namely about how the Good Witch Azura Book 6 would play along. The duo then received their test results. Marcy got an A+, whilst Luz got a C. The teacher then explained to the class that if they didn't do so well, they can see her after class for extra credit, to which Luz and Marcy did so. The teacher having told Marcy that she has no reason to do so as a result of getting A+, to which Marcy reminds her that something may happen between now and next semester. The teacher then says that for extra credit they have to write a short story that can be about literally anything, which both makes them excited. After leaving class, Luz then asks Marcy about what she wants to be when she grows up. She responds that while she hasn't really given it too much thought, her parents already have plans in mind. Luz then responds with that due to her ADHD, she can only really see herself becoming a writer and not a witch for obvious reasons. Marcy suggests that she become the fantasy writer of a potential hit series, and that she could be a character in that story, to which Luz says that she'll have to think about what she wants it to be first. We then cut later on in the story, with Marcy and Luz brainstorming ideas for what the story could be before they settled on an idea. A few weeks passed of writing and the teacher was impressed with what they've written, not only saying that she'll give them extra credit at the end of the quarter, but also that Luz has the potential of being a great writer if she practices enough. The chapter then ends with Luz telling Marcy that the teacher loved it and if they wanted to write an Azura fanfiction together at some point. I am a bit biased because Marcy Wu is one of my favourite characters in fiction, but I love this chapter. Luz and Marcy's chemistry is superb, and I honestly ship them more, though this isn't the main ship of the story, as we'll see that ship shortly. I also love them both writing a story together, and I do relate to Luz not doing so great academically. Overall, this is a short but sweet chapter that I find brilliant. Another perfect score of 10 out of 10 for this one. Chapter 4 marks the last of these series of chapters in which it's just Luz doing stuff to the Canon Calamity trio, and, as the title told us, we're rounding off with a Luz and Anne chapter. The chapter begins with Luz and Anne going for a stroll in the forest before stopping to skip rocks across the pond. The two then notice an owl that appears off. The owl looked like it was made of wood and it was more angular than others. It also had amber eyes. Gee, that sounds familiar. They also spot a frog with pink skin, with Luz advising Anne not to touch it as it could be a poison dart frog, though she's curious as to what it's doing in California instead of South America. Yeah, wonder why. And I also wonder why he looks sorta familiar. Anne then thanks Luz for hanging out with her today. Sasha wanted Anne to come to the mall with her, but Anne declined due to her not having the money to do so, which really pissed Sasha off, and that Sasha never really wanted to hang out where Anne suggested. The conversation then turns to Anne's history of Sasha and why Sasha behaved the way she does. Anne then revealed that during a sleepover, she overheard Sasha arguing with her dad. This led her to believe that Sasha acts the way she does due to a poor relationship with her father, with him being absent for most of the time. She doesn't, however, talk to Sasha about this and fears she'll lose her as a friend. Luz replied that friendships should not be like that and she could have had an honest conversation about such things. After some more chatter, Anne offers Luz to eat at her family restaurant, Thai Go, to which Luz accepts. Later, Luz and Camila arrive at Thai Go before Anne introduced Luz to Anne's mother. Luz then ordered the Tom Yum Kung before Anne recorded her eating it as part of the Tom Yum Kung challenge, which didn't exist as Anne and Luz just made it up on the spot. The first 4 spoonfuls were tolerable, but the 5th was really when the spice began to hammer in. Luckily for Luz though, the tea had milk in it, so it wasn't too bad. After that, we are given the scene of Camila and having a conversation, revealing that it was who told Camila about St. James Middle School, and that Anne reminds of herself when she was younger, alongside the two bonding over them being immigrants, being from Thailand and Camila being from the Dominican Republic. After some more chit chat, the chapter then ends with Anne showing Luz Suspicion Island, them hugging it out, and Anne feeling warm and fuzzy about the hug. This was another great chapter. Whilst I do have some issues about the pacing, as it could have been done a little bit better, it doesn't really detract from the final score. Luz and Anne's interaction was really good, Camila and bonding over their commonality was this chapter's highlight, and the Tom Young Kung bit was pretty funny. Overall, another perfect score of 10 out of 10 despite its flaws. It is the last day of the school year and Luz is hella excited. Yippee! She even rocks on the hoodie and shorts she has in the main timeline, cat hoodie and all. One short scene of Luz walking in on Camila singing later, and then we cut to Luz arriving at school. Anne was wearing a sundress that had flowers on it with sandals, Sasha was wearing a t-shirt that read bad girl, fucking girl failure more like, and also with sandals. Marcy, however, forgot it was a non-uniform day, and so she came in her uniform. Well, that's just Marcy for you, clumsy old fella. After adoring Luz's cat ears on the hoodie, she asks where did Luz get it, to which Luz responds with that it was at the mall, and if she showed Marcy earlier, she could have worn it. Marcy isn't too bummed out, and she says all of summer counts as free dress day / non-school uniform. After Sasha dismisses Marcy by saying she would have forgotten about that too, the quartet yell last day of school followed by a nice group hug. Sasha reveals that she has a party planned, but Anne adds that her parents want her to work at the restaurant part-time, though she isn't too bummed out as that just means she can make more money for herself. Upon being told by Sasha that she's invited, Luz was in disbelief given that she was a social outcast, so much so that she even blushed. After listing off what they do at slumber parties, Anne queries Luz about what she plans to do over the summer. Luz replies with playing some video games, rereading the Azura series, and watching some anime, and it better be Dragon Ball Z Kai or Ruby because that shit is peak. Yes, I called Ruby peak, because it is peak, don't at me. As well as hopefully getting a new job that she could play the new Fire Emblem game, or Flame Emblem game as it referred to in universe. Luz then mentions how crazy it would be if they were forced to fight each other. Marcy then said that unfortunately her parents are getting her extra tutoring due to them wanting her to be the best of the best in high school. After the group makes plans to hang out at the mall after school, we cut to the school day having ended with the quartet getting picked up by Mrs. Wainwright to drive them to the mall. Sasha having stayed nearby for a little longer to chat with her. Sasha asks when her dad will return from a business trip, to which her mother responds with that she'll have to stay a little while longer, much to Sasha's dismay, but she gives her lunch money to lighten her spirits. Whilst the quartet went about their business, Luz notices a security guard watching them. Sasha explains that his name is Frank, not to be confused with Frank of another fanfiction, we'll get to that fanfiction at some point I promise, and that he thought Sasha was shoplifting, only for a search to reveal that she was innocent. Or was she? Much to Anne's discomfort. Marcy then shows Anne her new hoodie, to which Anne says that they should get matching ones at some point. Later on at the food court, the quartet are having pizza and playing Creatures and Cabins, with Luz's character being Lazura, as she would of course. The chapter then ends with them planning a sleepover. Once again, this is another brilliant chapter, with the highlight being the Creatures and Cabins session. My favourite part character-wise is Luz's reaction to being invited to a sleepover with the Canon Trio, as I really do relate to that. Except that I've never been invited to a party or sleepover in my life, but still. And the character development still being superb in this chapter, Luz has fully integrated into the quartet. There isn't really much to say despite me never having played Dungeons & Dragons, and so I wouldn't know any of the Dungeons & Dragons shit, but whatever, this still does not detract from another perfect score of 10 out of 10. The mid-arc finale is interesting, which is not really a full chapter per se, but rather a collection of stories, in which this case over the course of summer. First off, Anne at work. After and Anne were talking about arguing with people on internet forums and watching videos, Camila walks into Tai Go with offering her some food. Camila asks Anne as to how she met Luz, to which she responded that she nearly ran her over on her bike. Camila then teases Anne about telling her mother about her bike riding habits. After some nice chatter, the story ends with Anne finding the note on the tip that Camila gave to her. The note read, "Thank you for being a friend to my daughter," with a smiley face. Nothing really to write home about here, it's a short but sweet section. Next, we have Let's Go to the Movies. There isn't really much to say about this short story, it's just Luz and Anne watching a movie called Ponte to Pompin and then getting emotional about it, before Luz offers to take Anne to see the next Azura movie. Anne replies that Marcy made her go see the first one, which she thought was okay, however she said she may have liked it more had she read the books. Luz offers her 5 Azura books, but Anne declines, stating that she was more into manga and that reading wasn't really her thing, given that they do enough reading as is at school, with Luz adding that the books are usually really dated. And to be honest, Luz really is speaking facts, like who want to read some boring ass shit from 1894? Unless of course you like them, in which case, you do you. But like they force us to do, and it freaking sucks, man. Anyway, the section ends with Anne saying that she'll give Azura a shot. This was interesting, but not exactly much to write home about. I find the commentary about the stuff at school that kids read pretty cool. Alas, this is not exactly my favourite of these stories, relatively speaking. Next, we have father-daughter time. This one's actually pretty interesting. Here we have Mr. Waybright taking Sasha out to a restaurant. Good on you, dude. Yippee! Except that 1, Sasha does not like the food, and 2, her father has been on the phone all lunch. He asked Sasha how this summer been for her, which she said it's been pretty good. In response to her father reminding her about flattery, she said that flattery can, and I quote, be one of the best manipulators. It's one of the hardest things to resist, and people will respond so well to perceived niceness. A quote that she knows word for word off by heart, which gives insight into how she got her personality, an aspect that wasn't too touched upon in canon, so it's really great seeing this stuff here. Sasha's day takes a turn for the worst once her father says that she'll be leaving once again at the end of July for a business opportunity, not helping that he thinks she won't understand any of it. She then asks him if she could host a slumber party over the weekend with an excessive amount of candy and soda. Her dad responds with whatever she wants, which ends that small section. A pretty interesting short story that gives a good insight into something that has been left relatively vague in canon, being her relationship with her father. I really like the way her father is portrayed here, a dude who, while still loves his daughter enough to give her stuff, spends too little time to properly bond with her given his job and thus give a damn. The penultimate section of this chapter is pretty interesting. Here we have Luce and Marcy about to write a fanfiction. Luce is quite passionate about this fic, as it is very descriptive, as Marcy puts it, with her saying that whilst it's her fic and she can be descriptive as she wants, the descriptiveness can cause some people to be uneasy. And considering the shit I've read on fanfiction.net and AO3, she couldn't be anywhere closer to the truth. Marcy then adds that Luce needs to add on some compelling reason as to why people want to read it, and not just an excuse for her to write some self-indulgent bullshit. Some chatter later, and Luce and Marcy crack on with writing. A few hours pass and they finally get a review that reads,
"Cool chapter, please continue."
Real fucking informative there. Understandably, this pisses the duo off, with Luce going on a short rant about why bother even leaving such a review if you're just gonna have a too-cool sentence, and I agree, like, for God's sake, tell us what's good and what's bad about the story, come on man. But we digress. This section then ends with Marcy agreeing to be Luce's editor. A short but sweet part of this chapter that I can certainly relate to. Like I said, if you're going to review something, actually properly review it. I also really like Marcy and Luce's interaction here. They're organic, and because Luce and Marcy are like-minded individuals, I actually kind of ship them, if that makes sense. Yeah, don't at me. Luce Arcee for life. The final section of this chapter doesn't actually take place on Earth, but instead in Amphibia, in particular with focusing on the planters. The section begins with the planters working on the farm. Sprig was doing some weeding, whilst Polly was threatening pests with a rolling pin, before Hot Pop asks Sprig to fetch some bread in town. Sprig states that it won't be a problem, as Maddie won't be there. Upon arrival, he knocks on the door, and to his disappointment, he is greeted by none other than Maddie Flower, having gone back from her apprenticeship, revealing that she can now do magic. An uncomfortable Sprig asks her what she learned, and Maddie responds with that she can now enact curses on people, among other things, though she is a novice and still requires practice. When asked about her teacher, Maddie responded with how her teacher was amazing, if not a little eccentric, and that rumours about her having a curse that made her turn into a different creature were mostly false, though she could curse herself if she wanted to. A bewildered Sprig asks why the hell would someone do that to themselves, and Maddie replies with how not all curses are bad. After telling Sprig that her teacher is taking in 3 other apprentices in the fall, one of whom being a quote, fancy pants from Utopia, the chapter then ends with Maddie awkwardly saying that she is now free to hang out, which falls on deaf ears. This segment was pretty cool, and it's nice that we get to see how Amphibia was doing prior to the girls' arrival. Maddie and Sprig behave much like they do in the series, and overall, their dynamic is replicated here exactly. The entire chapter itself is a nice bit of filler that, whilst doesn't exactly advance the general storyline that much, save for the last segment, is still a good read and deserves another perfect, spectacular, amazing 10 out of 10. The chapter begins with Luce arriving at Sasha's house, noting how she wasn't exaggerating when she said it was hella big. Anne and Marcy had already arrived, and so she was last to arrive. This was also Luce's first sleepover. She always wanted to get into one, but never got the opportunity to because, well, she had next to no friends. And now, not only was she having one for the first time, but it looks like it was going to be extremely dope. We then cut to the quartet having fun in the pool. The weather was perfect, as it was in the high 90s, or 20s if you're not from the US, and thus the perfect time to chill in the pool, with Sasha saying they have a long night of partying ahead of them. After they chilled out the pool for the few hours, they went off, dried themselves, and went to eat a plethora of snacks, including potato chips, not calling them crisps, fuck off, Skittles, pizza, none with pineapple, which is one of the best, yeah I like Hawaiian pizza, don't at me, soda, and a whole lot more. Not to mention they plan on staying up all night, just something they'll look back on fondly a few years down the line, as Sasha puts it. Then they do a bunch of stuff that usually people do in sleepovers for the next few hours, until at one point the topic of boys comes up. One person in particular, Dean Sanchez, likes Jessie Bliss, which incites a groan from the friend group before they all discuss the awful shit she did, a lot of them being quite racist, such as asking Anne if she'll bring sushi to school if she could repay Luz in tacos. Sasha then recalls how Jessie never repaid the $5 that she owes her, and that she began spreading rumours that Sasha's a thief. Marcy remembers how Jessie stuck gum in her hair, and afterwards Sasha stopped being friends with Jessie, and they all collectively agree that she's a massive sack of shit. Afterwards, they know how it's midnight, and, just mentioning it here, Anne wonders how uncomfortable it would be to walk around with just one shoe. Yeah, Anne. Yeah, that's not gonna happen. You're not gonna, you know, walk around for the better part of 9 months with just one shoe. Sasha then introduces Luz to the concept of scare dares and the Book of Losers. Basically, if one were to back down from a dare, they get their name permanently added into the book with no way of removing themselves by any means, i.e. it is permanent. And the dare they chose? Head into an abandoned house where people allegedly never return once they head in. Stay in the house without a flashlight for 15 minutes and then exit when it's up. Using an Uber, the girls arrive at their destination. Marcy was the first to enter the house and she left her after a few minutes due to too much weird noises. Anne dipped after 8 minutes, both wrote their names in the book afterwards. Luz then enters the house and doesn't find it weird at all. If anything, she finds it quite familiar. Before she knew it, Anne pops in. Not only did she remain in there for 15 minutes, but that she even beat the clock too. Considering that she was able to handle them as spiders, not entirely surprised that she has balls of literal steel. Once she stepped out, Marcy cheered while Sasha was like, "Oh shit, you actually did it." Sasha then walked into the house and immediately bolted the fuck out of there, demanding to know how Luz, Marcy and Anne dealt with, quote, the voice. When asked, Sasha refused to elaborate further. Suddenly, Sasha hears the voice again, enticing her with power and control, and the only thing that she apparently needs to do is, quote, come through the portal. Later, we cut to Sasha feeling all sad that she's now being added to the Book of Losers before Anne congratulates Luz. Sasha pulls Luz aside for a private conversation and asks Luz to reassure her that she didn't hear any voices. Luz once again has absolutely no clue what Sasha is talking about. Sasha reassures her that the Luz didn't say anything about her, Marcy or Anne. Before Sasha leaves, Luz hugs her and reassures her that she can tell her anything and that's exactly what friends are for. As Sasha heads to her room, she sees Luz, Marcy and Anne celebrating Luz's victory in the scare dare and so felt bad about being in the Book of Losers. This causes the voice to claim that they like Luz better than her, that she humiliated her, and that, due to Luz being a proper friend, she may end up exposing Sasha for who she is. Sasha promptly tells the voice to kick rocks before she turns in for the night. Afterwards, Luz, Anne and Marcy just fuck around for the next few hours via doing karaoke covers and then watching a movie. It should be noted here that Anne asked Luz to dance with her and that Luz was basically amity, as the 2020 Owl House fandom would put it. Soon, dawn came and Luz suggests calling it a day, but Anne was prepared to lock in and get to 6 AM. Only for her to collapse and fall asleep from the fatigue. She then asks if Luz could be a pillow for her and Luz accepts before Anne fell asleep on her lap. This is when Luz began to feel a ton of feelings that can be summed up as, holy fucking shit, I may have a crush on her. The chapter then ends with Luz giving Anne a peck on the cheek before wishing Anne good night. This chapter was absolutely brilliant. Actually no, brilliant is an understatement. It's a great culmination of all the previous chapter and it truly does feel like the peak of the quartet's friendship at this point in the story. The two highlights of this fanfiction definitely are Sasha's encounter with the voice, as it's a catalyst for a lot of events to follow, and Luz catching feelings for Anne, which was extremely well written as in a good description of how catching feelings for someone feels. Basically, it goes without saying this deserves a 10 out of 10. The chapter begins with Luz having a whole crisis about her sexuality and why the hell she felt things towards Anne. Even though she wrote a self-indulgent Good Witch Azura fanfiction about herself insert, that was with a guy, not a girl. Searching up online and asking people, albeit as Anon, she immediately jumps up as to how Camellia would react given the not so nice story she hears about LGBTQA people coming out to her parents. We then cut to Luz being dropped off at school by Camila, whilst the latter gives her a sketchbook and pencils, noting how much progress Luz has made since she got expelled. Anne thanks Luz for being her pillow, to which Luz nervously said that it was nothing. Some chit-chatted later, and Marcy and Sasha show up. Sasha explains to Luz that there is a school dance coming up, with Luz explaining, whilst feeling embarrassed, that she has no makeup, but not to worry, as Sasha would provide some to Luz, alongside Marcy providing nail polish, though Luz felt funny when Anne said she looked good without makeup. After a quote redhead girl took a photo of the quartet, we cut to a scene of Anne and Luz chatting during lunch. Sasha was out on cheerleading practice and Marcy was looking for stuff online. Luce asks Anne if she wants anything for her birthday, but Anne never really gave it much thought, though she does mention her parents want to throw a party and Marcy wants to get her something she found online. Gee, wonder what it is. Luce then offers to draw Anne, but requires that she takes a photo. Anne jokingly remarks about not making her ugly, to which Luce mutters that would be impossible under her breath. Unfortunately for Luce, Anne manages to hear that before Luce changes the topic if she ever felt things. Anne comforted Luce and placed a hand on her shoulder, which just really intensified Luce's feelings, and by that I mean Luce was a stuttering and blushing mess until Marcy arrived, which was one hell of a release for Luce. Marcy then talks about a music box that, according to some internet urban legends, causes anyone who holds the box to disappear and never return. It lures people in by claiming to have treasures that can make one set for life. That box, if you can't tell, is a calamity box. Anne then tells Marcy that she has been reading too much creepypastas and that they're all fake, to which Marcy retorts with basically, but you never know, before Luce tells Marcy about some creepypasta about a monster that traps you in a video if you don't watch it or something. I don't really fucking know much creepypastas outside of Jeff the Killer, Smile Dog, Sonic EXE, Ben Drowned and all that good stuff. Later we cut to Anne, Luce and Marcy waiting for Sasha to come out of the gym to finish her cheerleading practice. And once she came out, she revealed that she is now the cheerleading captain, much to the celebration of the rest of the quartet. Some chit chatter later, and Sasha gives out the photos of the quartet to Anne, Luce and Marcy. Marcy takes a purple marker and writes BFFs on it. The photo in question looks pretty much identical to canon, just a little bit larger to accommodate Luce, alongside with a different background. Sasha then tells Luce that she'll bring over some makeup for Luce that she can spice up that quote everyday look of hers. This, as it turns out, makes Luce extremely self-conscious. She thanks Sasha for quote looking out for her, but that's just a lie. Honestly, I can relate to Luce. Back home, Luce's mind is a war zone, reflecting what Sasha said and if there's something wrong with her. But on the bright side, she knows that she now has a crush on Anne and sees the upcoming dance as the perfect opportunity to ask her out, and that concludes the chapter. A pretty good chapter. Not as great as the last one, though Luce's feelings for Anne's flourishing is the highlights of this chapter, and the ending serves as a little foreshadowing to things to come. As always, the chemistry between the quartet is great, the pacing is good, and overall the chapter is an enjoyable read. This chapter earns a 10 out of 10. Oh boy, this chapter is gonna be a fucking doozy. The chapter begins with Luce panicking and pacing around the room because none of the clothes she has are quote acceptable according to Sasha. Like, bitch, why are you fucking judging her? Luce did have a crop top that Sasha lent her alongside telling her to wear it with jeans, shorts and boots, but that ain't Luce's vibe. Sasha then calls Luce and tells her to hurry up as she's already doing her hair. Luce says that the crop top is too revealing, but Sasha's like, that's the point, dumbass, and that if she wants to attract any boys, she has to reveal some skin. Despite Luce's wishes, Sasha ends the convo with her end of discussion tactic before hanging up on Luce. Luce at first feels bummed out, before she goes, nah, I'ma do my own thing, before she settles on All Reliable, her otter outfit, which, if you don't remember season 1 episode 17 of the Owl House, was the outfit she intended to bring to Prom, but ultimately settled on this. Part of her and her mother was unsure, but she wore it anyway. Come the dance, and Anne, Sasha and Marcy are all wearing fancy clothes and compliment each other, and so they just gotta wait for Luce, and she does turn up. To the collective WTF of everyone. What the fuck? Marcy and Anne were laughing their ass off, while Sasha asked, what the hell are you wearing, whilst extremely pissed. Luce replies that she picked up her old Halloween costume, an otter with a dark side. This really sets off Sasha as she sees this as Luce pretty much humiliating the friend group since, as Sasha puts it, one's reputation means everything in high school, and whilst I cannot exactly disagree, it's still really shitty of Sasha to try and control Luce. Despite Luce saying how she wants to be her own person, Sasha did not give a damn and basically had to stop herself since it was appearing that she was trying to persuade Luce into doing something that only Sasha wants. Sasha's reaction makes Luce feel worried about how Marcy or Anne would react. Thankfully, Marcy actually loved it, though she would have picked a tiger if she was in Luce's shoes. Unfortunately, Sasha shut Marcy up since she's apparently encouraging her. Anne didn't know how to react at first, but then called Luce brave for having the guts to wear something like that. She then calls Luce cute before she attempted to dance in her costume, only for Anne to catch her. Needless to say, Sasha is pretty much moulding and demands to know why they're siding with Luce despite the damage to their reputation. Anne retorts that Luce actually has the guts to do shit despite what people think, and that Sasha's only response was to just storm off, claiming that she needed some punch. Yeah, or you're just fucking coping and Steven. Afterwards, Luce, Anne and Marcy begin to question if Sasha is a true friend and she only really uses them as means to an end, but were interrupted as a good song came on, and so they began to dance to it. Meanwhile, Sasha was still extremely salty that Anne and Marcy were taking Luce's side over her. This causes the voice to once again rear its ugly head, and after some persuasion, Sasha was given two choices. either convince Anne to reject Luce or remove Luce from the group entirely. Meanwhile, the three girls were all dancing to the song. Luce was actually dancing pretty well, so was Anne, and Marcy tried, but given this is Marcy Wu, she ended up stumbling over and looking rather foolish. Once the climax of the song hit, Anne wondered if they'll be able to say that once they go to their real prom, with Luce saying that by then they would have asked out their partners, so they thought that would be redundant. Anne goes to check on Sasha and offers that she join them. Sasha not only rejects but also pleads that Anne ditch Luce and go hang with her for the night, her justification that Luce is a social liability. Anne is quite annoyed, pointing out how much of a petty twat Sasha's being. Sasha then alerts Anne to the way Luce looks at her, leaving Anne to ponder. Afterwards, Marcy had to leave as it was getting late and so just leaves Anne, Luce and Sasha. Sasha apologizes for getting angry at Luce, and by apologize I mean she's just a fake apology, and suggests that Luce asks Anne to dance with her. Hesitant at first, Luce then agrees, and once Anne approached her, she then muttered, "And do you want to dance with me?" written exactly like that. Anne, seeing how there's nothing better, accepts and so they dance. As the two look into each other's eyes, Luce's brain begins stirring about how to tell Anne how she feels. Now, Miss Noceda, what will you do? Will you A. Simply confess your feelings to Anne and the worst that will happen is she'll know, hold on for a bit and confess at a later date, or kiss her right in the fucking lips and potentially toss out the budding friendship you had all because of the ship art and fanfictions you kept looking at. Oh, she picked C, and it went as well as you expect. Whilst Luce felt happiness for a second, she also felt herself being pushed away, opening her eyes and Anne going like, "What the actual fuck, Luce?" And then comes Miss Bryant, who, mind you, is a far-right fundamentalist Christian, accuses Luce of attempting to corrupt her. Yeah, she convinced herself the man upstairs doesn't like gay people, and then tells her to leave, but not before calling her an evil witch. Last time I checked, the holy book you pretend to abide by does not say anything about insulting 13-year-old girls who made a mistake, but whatever. Sasha then asks Anne if she's okay, and that Luce may have been manipulating her the entire time, and that as a result, Anne's reputation may be in jeopardy. Anne leaves saying that she just needs some air, and Sasha pretends to be concerned when in reality, Sasha's plan has officially kicked into high gear, though this wasn't entirely on her own merits as the voice simply just manipulated her into doing so. Meanwhile, Luce was in the locker room instead at the mirror, the voice in her head not only telling her how now nobody's going to like her since she not just kissed a girl, but forced herself upon her. Luce then smashes the mirror before the chapter ends with her having a breakdown and crying into the sink. This chapter was one hell of an emotional roller coaster. You can see Luce's social ineptness biting her in the ass, her acting on impulse, and her regretting it very quickly, which was incredibly well written. Sasha's manipulative tactics are on full display as her, or rather the voice's, intentions are to oust Luce from the friend group and thus have a tighter grip on Anne and Marcy. If chapter 7 was the highlight, then this chapter was the downfall, and it was only going to get worse for Luce here. Once again, another perfect score, 10 out of 10. Here we are folks, the final chapter of Arc 1 is upon us, and oh boy, is it a doozy. The chapter starts with Marcy arriving at school to notice that neither Anne, Luce or Sasha were present. Later on in theatre, she saw Anne look downtrodden and later saw Luce look really sad. Then, during lunch, she saw Anne and Sasha but not Luce. There, Sasha explained that Luce kissed/forced herself upon Anne, describing it as having traumatized Anne. Anne says that's a bit of a strong word to use, but states that she just doesn't want to talk about it. Curious, Marcy asks if Luce is doing okay, but Anne just snaps, stating that she don't give a fuck about how Luce feels. Sasha then tells Marcy to go ask Luce herself as they want to keep it gossip free. Cut to Marcy asking Luce her side of the story, and she gives off a summary of everything since the sleepover. Marcy comforts Anne and explains that at some point the two will have to talk things out and things will just get worse and worse between them, with Luce being extra worried that she blew her chances with Anne. Lucky for Luce though, Marcy doesn't really care that much as she's bi, since that just changes virtually nothing, based on Marcy, huge W by the way, stands for her attraction. Then the topic of going to another world pops up, to which Luce says it sounds impossible, but Marcy says hypothetically about a box that could take people to another dimension away from this one. Gee Marcy, wonder why you brought that up. Wonder why you mentioned that box specifically. Afterwards, Marcy comes up with an idea. Luce should explain herself to Anne on her birthday and apologise. Luce grudgingly accepts the apology, with Marcy reassuring her that she has a day and a half to think about it. The next day, it is Anne's birthday, and wishes her a happy birthday in Thai and that there will be a party at 6 PM. Anne thanks her but asks if she can hang out with Sasha and Marcy a little bit after school. Asks if she also meant to include Luce in that list, which immediately dampens Anne's mood, leading her mother to ask if she's okay. Anne wanted to tell everything but brushed it off, given how she and B grew up in a time that wasn't exactly kind to same-sex couples. Disclaimer that I have no knowledge of 1980s to 90s fan culture towards LGBTQI folk, so I don't really have much knowledge on that. But however, Anne was worried how they'd react or how they'd feel about Luz, so instead told a lie that nobody asked to dance with her. Comforted her and told it'll be all okay before Anne prepares to depart. Gives her the cow Mew Bing and Anne heads for school. Meanwhile, Luz was feeling like utter shit as it was Anne's birthday instead of the portrait she made for Anne. Camila comes in to tell Luz that they'll need to talk. Luz was shitting absolute bricks as she thinks the school may have just called her about what she did with Anne. To Luz's relief, Camila actually wanted to discuss about what's wrong with Luz as she's been feeling really down for the past several days. Instead of telling her what actually happened, given how Camila doesn't know she's bisexual, Luz instead claims that a boy kissed her via forcing himself upon her and that, while she may have crushed on him, didn't ask for it yet still felt bad when he was sent off by a teacher. Camila comforted Luz and explained that it was wrong for him to do so, her saying that just made Luz wince, and she tries explaining that she was shy and he didn't want to say anything. Camila still said that she shouldn't defend this guy and that whilst it's up to Luz to forgive her, she should be looking for a genuine apology, not because someone told him to. Fast forward to a few hours later with Anne and Sasha, much like in canon, skipping school. Anne was still bummed about the Luz situation. Sasha wants to cheer her up and forget about Luz. Anne is bothered that Luz won't even talk to her about it and that she may even not want to speak to Luz again. Sasha states that she deserves an apology for Saw, quote unquote, add an asterisk there, we'll find out shortly why, but for now, let's get the fun started, as she says. Unbeknownst to them, Luz is watching them from around the corner. Fast forward a little while later, Luz arrives to find Marcy sitting by herself on a bench. They formulate a plan that around 6 PM they will meet up with Anne to apologise, as what Sasha's suggestion they will do so. But also, Marcy shows what she's planning to give Anne, and it's a box, and if it isn't obvious already, that box is a calamity box. Much like our Amphibia fanfictions involving a fourth human arriving in Amphibia, the box looks virtually identical to canon save for a fourth gem. This time the gem is purple. After that, Marcy and Luz go and write some more fanfictions to cheer Luz up before Marcy has to go, but not explaining to Luz that her dad said that she needs to go because of something important. A few hours later, Luz arrives to confront Anne. Sasha angrily demands as to who invited her here before Marcy stands up for her. Sasha smugly says that Luz won't need to apologise before Anne straight up says that because Sasha gave quote good advice that they can no longer be friends. This was pretty much a massive nuclear bomb to Luz's heart and soul, and thus she was too distraught to notice the box began acting weirdly when Anne opened it, and then all four got transported to Amphibia. The arc then ends with Luz panically attempting to call out her now former friends, seeing that they're now absent, trying to contact their mother before finding out that service is down, and then crying into the ground when reality sets in. Not only does she have no friends, but now she's in some place far from Earth. Holy crap, what a way to end an arc. Much like the previous chapter, it was an emotional roller coaster, and it really does show how much of an absolute asshat Sasha is. Purposely twisting shit so that Luz is ousted from the friend group out of nothing but pure pettiness and spite is downright awful. She's doing this so that Anne and Marcy, seeing how new friends just want to use them, end up depending on her and sticking to her only for protection in exchange for her doing what she wants, though it must be stated that she isn't entirely at fault. The fact that Marcy attempted to stand up for Luz was heartwarming, and you can see Anne genuinely wanted to talk things out with Luz before Sasha played mind games. Overall, this chapter is a perfect, brilliant, spectacular, ultimate, amazing, whatever adjective, 10 out of 10. Overall, Arc 1 of The Owl and the Frog is nothing short of spectacular. First off, the characters. Luz Noceda has been written so well and her interaction with the canon characters pulled out so brilliantly that it genuinely feels and reads like it came straight out of an episode of the Owl House or Amphibia. Her gushing about her hyperfixations to the main trio, her developing crush on Anne, as well as her heartbreak, all the more makes it sound like the Luz I know. The canon characters themselves are also written very well. Sasha's manipulative personality was showcased brilliantly, with her plot to isolate Luz from the friend group becoming increasingly apparent despite it not being outright stated to you, just shows how well this aspect of her was pulled off. Marcy Wu's dynamic with Luz is so great that I honestly ship them more with Luz than anything else. Writing the Azura fanfiction is honestly the highlight of their interactions thus far, and that foreshadowing about Marcy's intentions prior to the box being revealed, let alone true colours, was quite clever. I think Anne's dynamic with Luz speaks for itself. Luz slowly developing a crush on her was possibly one of the best possible ways you could write something, unlike certain other fanfictions I've read, and this just makes the scene of her falling out with her all the more heartbreaking. The pacing is fantastic, formatting is well done, and the best part of this fic is Luz slowly building up a friendship with the trio, reaching its peak, and it all collapsing. Whilst chapter 3 and chapter 6 weren't particularly my favourite episodes, it still does not detract from the 10 out of 10 that they both deserve. Overall, this arc deserves a perfect score of 10 out of 10, but this still does not answer the question as to why I think this is the greatest Amphibia fanfiction ever written, as we still have arcs 2 to 6 to cover, as only then will it determine whether my claims stand up to scrutiny, so stay tuned for that. A special thank you to Champion El Cid for not only being the author of this brilliant fanfiction, but donating £20 to my Ko-Fi. That will forever be appreciated. Hit that like button, click that subscribe button, turn on notifications if you enjoyed this video, and I will see you all later.